Hi everyone, this is Artie from Human Chapters. I'll tell you a little bit about the human chapters. Humans are living narratives with a past, present, and future. These narratives constitute of a number of chapters across the lifespan. The aim of these conversations is to highlight a chapter of the narrative and unpack its connections to other chapters. I don't really care whether people are natural storytellers, but I truly do believe each one of us has a story to tell. In acknowledgement to country, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which now comprises Greater Shepparton. We pay respect to their tribal elders, past and present and emerging. We celebrate their continuing culture and we acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. Today, we are going to talk to Allan. Allan's from Shepparton, and his chapter is going to be called Discovery. On to you, Allan. Feel free. Yeah, introduce
Thank
yourself.
you. Well, hello, thank you for having me. So yeah, I suppose just to to kind of explain a bit why I call my chapter Discovery is just to sort of discuss the turning point I think I had it in my life in my sort of young adulthood where I'm growing up in Scotland, which is where I come from, as you can probably tell from my accent. I'm not from Shepparton, I just live there now. I've been here for nearly 10 years actually. So but I grew up sort of in a sort of mid-sized Scottish city, and for most of the time in a sort of single parent household, and I was really well cared for by my mum, and I grew up with my brother and my sister, and we had quite busy lives because my mum was always good at encouraging us to take part in hobbies and things like that, you know. So we always school hobbies, and just our house was very busy and a happy house. But I remember finishing school and not having a great idea about what to do, like what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to commit to a sort of 4-year spell at university and all the inherent debt that follows without a real clear plan of where I would go from there. So I just started to work, and I thought, well, I'll work for a year or two and see how I feel and try things on and see what happens. And the result of that for me was that I actually never really went back to study. I just kind of worked in various jobs and drifted around for a while, and I did various night classes and things, but I couldn't really find any calling that I could commit to. And so the reason I bring it up is that I just ended up in a career. I'd been working hospitality, and I ended up like so many people who kind of don't have like that ambition anyway. At least you just end up growing in the role that you're in. And so I became a manager for a conference center for a number of years, and I knew I didn't like that. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I was working really hard, but not really enjoying it. I think that was probably quite clear on my face at the time and among my friends. You know, I was doing fine and I worked hard. I had a good work ethic, but I just didn't like it. And so I thought, right, I've got to retrain. I've got to find something else, you know? So I knew I wanted to find something else, and I had energy to do it. And I was lucky enough to have a good enough education and good enough opportunities, you know? And so I moved cities to Edinburgh from my hometown, which was Dundee, also known as the City of Discovery, after the great explorer ship that still sits there in the harbour to this day. But yeah, it's a different story. So I moved over to Edinburgh, and I actually got a really lucky opportunity to commence working in project management as a sort of trainee. And again, swiftly as chance would have it, I accelerated through that quite fast, just coordinating teams and managing a manufacturing process for an international company. And again, I got to this point where I felt a lot more proud of my work, but it wasn't hitting the mark for me. And I was really, really disappointed and sad in myself because I'd found this better job that I thought had greater status and greater opportunity, and still just couldn't put my finger on what it was I wanted. And I was developing all these skills, and it was driving me just wild trying to figure out why I couldn't find happiness in that job. And eventually it just came to my head, and I was actually, I didn't realize until later, like looking back on it now, how just basically unfulfilled I was and how it was making me sad, knowing I had all these skills and resources at my hands and the privilege that I've had growing up, just to not feel like I'm doing something better. And it was one day, I was when I was living in Edinburgh, I was at the Commonwealth swimming pool, just queuing to get in. And I saw a group walk past me, and it was sort of like a couple of adults and maybe half a dozen sort of teenagers. And it became clear as they were in front of me in the queue that a lot of these teenagers seemed to have like intellectual disabilities or you know, sort of impairments. And so a couple of the adults that were with them were clearly workers of sort. And I was just watching, just thinking like, wow, like look at these workers, you know, and they must feel good, like just telling people that's what they do. And look what they're doing, just taking just people out to do basic community oriented fitness, health, just community access things that we take for granted. I just thought that looks like a good job. And I remember that day because I felt so jealous, even though the career I was in was probably paying heaps more and all that. But I was jealous of the work they were doing, and I thought that would be such a source of pride, you know. But then, as we do, we get swept away in our lives again, and I buried my head in my work again for a few more months and forgot all about it. And it wasn't until an opportunity came for me to move over to Australia, and that was an opportunity in the form of a big relationship breakup where I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? And I thought, right, that's it, I'm getting on a plane, that's it, I'm out of here. And so I just reset. I just went, right, I'm leaving my job, I'm leaving everything behind, I'm just going to go to Australia because I have family here as well. So I thought, well, I'll have a base of operations, I'll go to Australia for a year, and I'll go and be young for a year and not worry about all this stuff, you know. And so I did, and I traveled around Australia for a good year, and then I got a second year visa, again, sheer luck. And I was really fortunate. My mother, who lives in Shepparton, had been working in disability, and she said to me, we're looking for casuals, and you can have a sort of trial if you want. I know people, so when you come, you can have a trial over here and see how you go. And at the end of my first week, that was me. I wasn't leaving. Like, I was convinced. I was so lucky to get an opportunity in that environment, and it was just wonderful to go into work every day and just work with people who wanted help. You don't want to say needed help either. I mean, there was needs that we could help with, but just to help people, just for the most mundane, basic things even that we take for granted, and just to do anything at all that just turns someone's day just that little bit better. That was enough. And yeah, so I stayed there as long as I could, and then I had to step away for a few months because of visa things, because I was still formalizing.
Yeah.
But then after that, I ended up staying with that company for nearly 5 years, working around various departments. And I actually was lucky enough to get a look into doing community outreach work, supporting people in the community with intellectual disabilities and helping people live independently, but just foster that independence and do a lot of role modeling, and then promotion of sort of helping people to find whatever extra things they wanted in their lives, you know, if it was to get new hobbies, seek work, get driver's license, all that sort of stuff, just real practical things in life. And I don't think I ever had a sick day. I just loved the work, and I loved helping. And so that for me, I think, was the essence of my discovery, I think, you know, because I just happened upon it by chance. And I'd been looking, and I knew I wanted something different all my time in Scotland, but then to get a chance to do it and to just enjoy the feeling that I get from that, it's entirely selfish. Like, it's a nice thing to help people, but it makes me feel good, and that was my discovery. So yeah, I feel really grateful for that, you know.
Yeah. And Allan, and you talked about that fulfillment, right? Like your journey in different careers and how the lack of fulfillment, and you described it as you being sad. Is there any other way of describing that lack of fulfillment compared, and even in contrast to what fulfillment, yes, it made you feel good, but under that, what else was there?
Well, maybe another way of, let me think. I could put an example to it, I suppose, because purpose, maybe. Yeah. Purpose would be another way of putting it, because I remember, like, I was traveling into work when I was still in Scotland, working as a project manager, and I was coming into the car park one day and it was snowing, like just a real wet, cold Scottish day. And I used to get the train in, trying to be conscientious, you know, I'd get the train and I'd walk into work. And then the managing director pulled into the car park just as I was covered in snow, and it was still dark because that's how it is. And I remember just thinking, right, walking into work, what's my day like? Right, I've got to be quick and efficient. And I realized that everything I was doing, all my work, all of my focus and all my energy was there to make money for a company. And the managing director drove past me, and don't get me wrong, I really like the guy, I respect the guy, but he drove in his big fancy Range Rover with his alloy wheels and his private rego plate. And I was like, that's what I'm working for. That's what I'm working for. I mean, I've got skills that I feel proud of and a work ethic that I feel proud of, but the outcome, the purpose of my effort wasn't meeting what I think I was putting in. You know, I wasn't getting something that resonated with, I guess, my ethics or whatever it is I think I should be doing in the world, you know.
Yeah.
And so even just to be working day to day with people doing real simple things like taking people with impairments to the swimming pool, or helping somebody do their shopping, or just the real basic things like that for me is 100 times more fulfilling than running a high value contract and meeting the targets. That doesn't have the same feeling for me. It does for a lot of other people, and fair enough, I respect that. But that was my discovery and my fulfillment, I think.
Yeah, that's quite fascinating. And I think a lot of the times, I don't know, I wouldn't make the generalization, but myself included, trying to figure out what to do that's going to meet, that purpose, the calling. It's really like, yeah, I do something that meets and aligns with it, and I'm grateful every single day for it, because I know, yeah, like that passion is there and the drive is there. And yes, you have days where you are tired like anyone else, but you get back up and yeah. And again,
Yeah.
selfish reasons, right? Like makes you feel good. But yeah. And so my next question is, through this discovery, did you find a part of yourself that was foreign to you? And what was that?
Authenticity, I guess. I mean, it's whenever I used to describe to people in my last career and stuff what I did, I don't think I lit up when I spoke about it. I mean, people always tell me when I tell them what I do now, you obviously love it. You know, that's what people say. You love your work. You know, and I do. I think it just comes through because it's just genuine. I do. If I was lucky enough to find something I like, and so yeah, I think that authenticity is kind of the big thing, I suppose. And again, like I talked about stumbling upon things or being fortunate enough, because I dwelled so much in my younger years. Like I think you're about 11 or 12 years old, you start to choose your school subjects geared towards what you're either going to study or work in. And you've no idea at that age what you're going to do. You know? So there's so much pressure placed on us to try and achieve that. That probably played a lot into why I felt unfulfilled, and then bad that I felt unfulfilled, you know, because you're conditioned growing up to think that you should set a goal and a target and aim for it and achieve it. And, you know, generally speaking again, you know, but to land on something that you actually do want to do is a real lucky thing, you know.
Absolutely. And also, yeah, that whole idea of how society is constructed and how everyone is, you're moving from one phase to another as though it's almost a linear trajectory. And we know much better than that it's actually not. But then there isn't the freedom or flexibility to have a different path or do something different, try it out. Yeah, I would empathize. And now that you have, found your calling, your purpose, in a sense, since that moment of discovery, did did you ever, or do you ever think about what it felt like when you were looking for that, almost soul searching? In contrast, what sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I do. Because I used to live for the weekend, you know, or you just mourn your Monday to Friday or whatever shift you had, you know. And that's one of the real key things I remember the most, is just not feeling proud about what I did, even though there's nothing wrong. I mean, you're still working and getting by, but it's strange because having now got to where I am, I think I'm more aware of the contrast from to look back on it rather than how I felt at the time. I didn't know why I wasn't just quite fulfilled or feeling too proud of it. So that right back then, I guess I was just, I didn't focus on my work or promote it or talk about it when I wasn't there. And now I just feel like it's a massive part of my identity now as well. I feel, and try not to bore people with it. I don't just talk to people about it all the time, but it really does sit quite comfortably with who I feel I am.
Yeah.
So I move through adulthood, you know.
Right. And so this is feel free not to answer this, but who you are, like if I ask, who are you? What are the different identities you feel really, you've talked about authenticity and you talked about with this career. So yeah, who are you?
Who am I? That's a good question. I am a family man, and I say that first because it's important to acknowledge my wife and my children and my parents and my siblings, and they're the source of my values. You know, they're the reason I do everything. But I think that's also important because that's a smaller part of community in general. You know, and I think that's what I'm growing into, is probably a lot more community minded. And I think that's one of the aspects I really enjoy about the work I do now. I'm no longer working in outreach in disability. I'm in a managerial role now, coordinating a team of case managers in a justice space. So my reach is wider now. And I think, yeah, so sort of family man with a community mind. And I like to think I'm social. I like to think I enjoy just letting my hair down, so to speak, just with friends, you know, like just enjoy having a glass of beer or a cup of coffee and playing music with friends. And so that sort of social, family, community mind. I like to take leadership where I can, but I also like to think I can listen. I hope so. So I think that's my, I don't know, that's my attributes. I don't know how you work.
Absolutely. And again, this might be a weird question, but when you worked in the disability sector, and you know how we go around and like that soul searching, did you actually, was there any parallels between your world and the people you were working with in terms of that? Well, yeah.
Yeah, I guess parallels, like, look, there'd be certain clients for sure who would stick in my memory that I did a lot of one-on-one work with over a number of years, and the growth that we both would take together. I mean, there was one. I remember one client in particular who, a young man. He was, well, I suppose he was only about 6 or 7 years younger than I was at the time, I guess. But I was teaching him basic social skills and some practical skills as the model to, like, you would have a couple of practical activities, so that you'd be kind of role modeling a whole bunch of other things that they're just trying to pick up residually, you know, from you, you know. And so we just built this relationship. And I think that while I was growing and learning how to try and emulate good behavior and social skills and, you know, pro-social development, at the same time I was watching him kind of growing that, but not just off of me. He was taking my cues and going off into his own life, and then having his own conversations within his own family relationships and things, and then coming back to me with things he'd said that had even gone right or wrong. And we grew this ability to kind of laugh about it as well, which was really nice, you know. So it was this nice social connection as well as just a sort of a worker and client relationship. And I guess when you talk about the parallels in our lives, my growth was learning that you can connect with people even though you've got a professional relationship. You can connect and you can be sincere and authentic without having to pretend that you're mates, or, you know, you can call it for what it is and still have a really genuine growth together. And I think that's probably one of the best ways of talking about the parallels of that work when it's me and the people I was trying to help.
Yeah. That's really nice. And it's such a wonderful way to put it, is that it's the learning from each other, right? Like no matter what sort of a professional you are, you can be the top of your field, the top of your game, but there is always something to learn. We live in such a dynamic world. Things are always changing.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for that, I mean, when you even going back to the the title of this chapter, like discovery, I think it doesn't mean that where you land is where you stop. Like that evolution and that growth should always continue. And where I find myself really getting a lot out of trying to help people like skill develop or capacity build or just change a situation, and more recently helping people kind of out of bad situations. It's that works for now, and I like that, but it's always promoting growth and development, but also self-reflection, you know. And so while I say this to my clients, that you got to practice what you preach too. And so I often find if I'm getting to a point where maybe it's I'm looking for a change, or I'm looking for the next challenge, or don't stay there stagnating, because it's no good for the people you're trying to help either. You've got to try and move forward and grow as you feel you're growing, and give somebody else a chance who might have that motivation if you feel you're not doing the same work you were a year ago or whatever, you know. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And before we go on to your current job and role, when when we're kids live in the present moment, and they just, it is what it is for the now. Do you find yourself going back to your childhood, to experiences, memories that you fully embraced? And are there any parallels between your childhood and your discovery point?
I was actually thinking about this the other day, oddly. It's probably off the back of you sending me some information, but I had a couple of memories from primary school. And I do remember one day there was a kid, it was in my sister's class, actually. He was in my big sister's class. And I'm sure he wouldn't like me saying this, but he was a bit of a sook, this kid. You know, he was always the kid that was crying in the playground, and he didn't have much resilience, I suppose. I was going to put it in the terminology we use now. But I remember he was crying in the playground, and I asked him what was wrong. And he said he'd forgotten his lunchbox or something, so he didn't have a snack. And I remember just standing there, and I had like an apple and a packet of chips in my hand. So I just offered him one, you know, and he immediately just stopped crying. I was like, oh, that was easy. And I just went off. I didn't stop and play with him or anything. I just wandered off. I thought, well, that stopped him crying. I don't know. I just felt good about it. And it was a strange thing to muse back on, you know, because the clues were there. I remember another, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, keep going.
There was another one that I nearly got beaten up for when I was probably 8 or 9 years old as well, because before I'd moved to the city in Dundee, we used to live in this little village sort of 20k out of Dundee, and we didn't see a lot of kids from outside the village too often. But one day there was this kid was in here riding his bike, and a bunch of our sort of local kids got together and they tried to make a trap for him on his bike. So they'd cover these rocks up with grass and stuff and said, see if you can ride through this grass. And I was on the inside, so I knew what was going on, and I couldn't bring myself to let it happen. And so as the kid was sizing up to try and do this, I ran over and pulled all the grass off the rocks, and he saw it and he stopped. And I remember this kid being like, oh, thanks. And he took off. And I was just left there among all these other guys who'd set him up saying, hey, what'd you do that for? You know, I kind of had to beat it pretty sharp, but I wish I still had that courage, you know, because that was the right thing to do. And I remember that. And I don't think I've had many opportunities in life to do that again that have been as obvious. And I think that might be one of the things I try and consider moving forward, you know, because it's a lot more complex in adulthood. That it's not just as simple as running over and uncovering the obstacle, you know. You've got to navigate things a bit more cautiously, I think.
And I think, like, I see that it's a good thing, and also it has its pros and cons. The more you can see into the future, the more scenarios you can almost predict it. But when you're a kid, just do it. Again, it's in the present, right? It's in the here and now. That's not right. We'll just do it. And the consequences are frequently not something you think about first. But as an adult, you think about the consequences first.
Yeah, it breeds fear. So you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I'll let somebody else do it. I'll keep my head down.
Absolutely. Isn't it? Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it. From a younger self. And so tell us about your role now. What do you do? I'm quite fascinated.
Well, I work for quite a specific program, actually. We work in the court, and we basically do case management for people who are before the court with charges that are kind of in the level of being granted bail. So not serious high level offending, you know, but generally what we do is we go into the police custody and we'll meet with these people if we're referred to by a magistrate or a lawyer or someone, and we'll have a chat to them about what what they perceive their barriers to be, the things that may have led to the reasons they've ended up in custody, you know. So commonly it's things like drugs, homelessness, mental health, and there's a great deal of sort of family violence, physical health. And so what we try and do is put together a bit of a picture of sort of psychosocial history, as well as the sort of social difficulties they're struggling with, in a bid to try and coordinate some supports for these people that they can engage with and try and make the improvements that they've identified themselves. They do this over a short spell of time prior to the magistrate deciding to sentence them. And what we do is we'll case manage and coordinate the various supports that these people might need. And everybody gets a different support plan based on their account of their needs. You know, we don't tell people what they need to do. It's up to people to really identify that themselves, and we'll help them achieve their goal. But if they manage to sort of trek along well and actually achieve that goal, or at least make some progress on some of those needs, the problems that led them there, the magistrate can often take that into account when they come to sentence the person. So the idea of that being that, yes, there's a motivation to avoid prison, for example, if they can turn their lives around in the community. But then if they can do that, they don't have to go off to jail, which is not a place for people to recover, especially with mental health or drug addiction. You know, that you don't get better in jail. I'm not just speaking out of school. There's a myriad studies for why that doesn't work, you know. And it's also extremely expensive to the taxpayer to jail people for a year or 2 years, whereas if people can actually make their social changes in their lives, in their communities, they tend not to have to go to jail if they can just keep that progress going along. So we try and case manage people to get in touch with the supports that are already there in the community, and do a lot of sort of pro-social modelling and goals-driven development, in the hope that they can maintain it.
Yeah.
And so I performed that role as a case manager for 2.5 years or so. And I've again had a fortunate opportunity to step up into a leadership role in that team now. So I now get to coach the case managers in doing that and coordinate in a wider region rather than just in Shepparton. So
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find that many, do you have repeated cases come back on board, or like what is the maintenance like within that sphere of?
it's look, when you I guess anyone who works in community services know that you can't just set out to expect success upon success for your clients. But God, if we could even, it's hard to measure the success, I suppose. But yeah, we do see a lot of repeat people attending. But each time someone comes back, even if they're familiar with some of the services we've connected them to before, and they knew what worked or what didn't work, we're still narrowing down an option for them for the future. All right, that didn't work last time. Let's try this. Or sometimes people have gone off and they've gone really well, but then something's derailed them, like they've lost a loved one or something's happened and they've had a relapse and they haven't offended for say 2 years, but no, they've had a slip up and they're back here again. And we can pick up the threads, and we do a lot of rapport building with our clients and their networks. You know, a lot of the time we'll have some contact with various family members and friends of these people too. And so if they do come back, it's you're not starting from square one again.
Sure. Yeah.
And so all of it's worthwhile. And we've spent a few years building up the profile of our program since 2018, actually, when we started it up here. And so like local services know who we are, and we're quite a central case management role for people. And so like services can come to us and ask us for help, and as well as clients. So we are right in the middle of it for the justice space, and it's a really lucky thing, because it means that whenever we even see people down the street who are finished on the program and aren't formally engaged with it anymore, they'll stop for a chat. And moreover, like the best ones are when someone strides up to you and shakes your hand just to tell you they're still going well. Like that happens, and these are the real wins. You get 2 or 3 of these a year maybe, but that will fill your sails. Like, that's enough.
Absolutely. That is so, yeah, I can only imagine what that feeling would be like, because, yeah, within that position, you want the best for each one of them. And then,
Yeah. And it's a difficult space to have that same therapeutic approach as compared to some of my earlier roles, like working with people with disabilities, because the public perception would be that obviously working with people with disabilities, they're all innocents, whereas working with people who have needs but are in the justice system, the public view of them is probably less sympathetic.
Yeah.
But it's looking just past that, because for most of the people we work with, when we're putting together their psychosocial history, for many of them, there's been a huge disengagement from education and healthcare, and there's been often a history of trauma, especially when you're coming into substance abuse, and so much that's why I was saying earlier on, I was privileged. I had a privileged upbringing. I didn't go through a lot of things that my current clients would have gone through, and so acknowledging that is often a good way of building rapport with the people we support, because we say, I often say this to them. I often say, I don't care what you've done. I care where you're going to go and what you're going to change. That's what we're working on. We're working on your future. We can't change your past. And that's such a leveler for a lot of our clients to go, all right, well, this guy's going to give me a chance, you know? And then if we can make that chance, then the benefit comes, because if the offending dries up and they can get away from causing hurt and harm to the community or other people,
Yes.
doesn't matter how we got there. So what if I'm sympathetic to someone the public thinks is evil? It's, if we can get them to the good point, then I can wear that, you know. That's all right. And it's tiring work, but it's worthwhile.
That's it. And it's really interesting you bring the point about, disengaged education. And so I'm back at that level at primary schools. And so speech pathology is my profession. And now, with the studies coming out, current research, language and literacy difficulties, and the high correlation to jail, to poverty, to mental health, like the stakes are incredibly difficult. And so, what are we doing at that particular system, right? Like at that particular time for these kids to at least give them a good opportunity to avoid or try to, like, we can't always guarantee it, but yeah. So that's really fascinating to hear. It's sure you end up in the court, and yes, the surface level reputation is, oh, oh dear, but scratching the surface and actually looking at what happened for this person. And I think it's so important to acknowledge, like you acknowledge privilege, but with the year 2020 that we've had, we're safe, and not everybody is in that position of privilege, right? The Maslow's hierarchy, but acknowledging that to go, yes, we can't take it for granted. Any one of us could be in that position, right? Like we're not now, but we don't know what the future's looking like. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's terrifying, and I think that the roles that you and I both do. I mean, you talk about, you have people in a sort of early childhood intervention sort of stage, or speech pathology in those early years. I guess that's pre-7 for a lot of them, pre age 7, perhaps, is it?
yeah.
That's
So yeah, they're different buckets, or like different categories of services for speech pathology for the kid. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I often consider this, because whenever I sit and reason out some of the clients that I speak to, we actually level out, how did you get here? What was how were you treated? How did society let you slip through so many cracks? And with some people, I don't always do that for everyone, because it promotes a victim mentality. But sometimes we can rationalize that out. And I find that where we sit in the court space, we're kind of the last stop before they just drop out, and that's them disengaged from society altogether by going into the prison system. And I think, well, how could this have changed before you landed here at my door? And for most of the people we support with the mental health and the sort of complexities between mental health and substance abuse, for example, they would have done better if they'd perhaps been supported more comprehensively in the healthcare system. So rather than reaching the justice system, move it up the river a little bit. Healthcare, if they've been caught by healthcare. I'm not blaming healthcare. I'm just saying, if they'd managed to get the help they needed through healthcare, whether it was rehabilitation, mental health support, whatever it was they needed, you think, oh, if they'd been stopped there, they wouldn't have got here. But then we reason it out further and say, well, how did they get to the need of, well, the point of needing healthcare? What could have stopped sooner? And then you talk about the next infrastructure. It probably is somewhere in the education sphere. When you're starting to get earlier, it's like, was it to empower people or enable them the opportunities to provide for themselves by getting that education and then the ability to go off and find work? Or even before that, just the fundamentals of rights and wrongs and work ethic. Again, the things that I took for granted growing up with. But if you've got people who have grown up with a parent or parents who have gone themselves through the justice system and the substance abuse cycle, they're not going to have any of that example early on. So that's where education almost lets them down. And it's, again, not the sole purpose of the state to educate these people. It belongs to the parents. But then you go back a generation and they've gone that cycle. And so they're just drifting down a stream and slipping through every crack until the last place they hit is us.
Yeah.
And we stage an intervention. And if it doesn't take, they go to jail and we lose them, you know. So socially, it's a hard thing to watch. We talk about the revolving door, but it's not a revolving door, it's a cliff edge. And I think getting people out of it after that is way harder, even in the work that we do just now. So
And how do you take care of your well-being being in the position you're in?
Good question. I was giving some thought to that today, because we are under a lot of pressure, you know. No, in reality, I make a point, and I make a real point of switching my computer off at 5 o'clock, because I get to work in a space where I'm not just in the community anymore. And I used to find myself working any hours, you know, jumping in the car if I got a phone call, you know. I don't work there anymore. I work in the court building. And so nothing's going to happen. No one's going to call me after 5. And so that's a real piece of luck. So I make sure every night I don't stay there and work. I could be there now working if I wanted to be. There's enough work to keep doing, but I don't. I come home and I play with my children, and I get to do some exercise, and we have a routine, you know. And then, you know, come the weekends, we get our friends around and the kids play together, and that's enough. That's all you need to do, you know. You chat with your friends. You don't think about work. You keep up a level of fitness, and you eat well and you sleep well, and you have to do it so you can come back tomorrow.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. My other question is, so at various points in life and in your careers, there've been discovery points, whether it's been actually a discovery of you're not fulfilled, but that in itself was a bit of a discovery. What has been your discovery in this role?
Oh, wow. Currently, actually, in this very role, at this point in time, being in a position where I'm probably coordinating the case managers, I'm getting a lot less time face to face with clients, sitting in a room with them, talking to them directly. And my discovery is that it's hard. I think I relied a lot on that fulfillment. Again, it comes back to it's almost selfish. Like the why I do the job is really the results for the people you're trying to help. That's why we do it. And so when you take a step back into a more managerial position, you take a step back from that front line, as you call it, I'm not getting that same job satisfaction, I suppose. Don't tell my boss. but it's reminding yourself why you do it. Because then if I can actually help oversee and empower like more staff, I've got a team who cover the region, and help kind of steer the ship and make their jobs easier and make sure the systems work and take their feedback to change what needs to be changed, that drives better outcomes for the clients and then the community. So the picture is bigger, but my actual hands-on, the reason I do it isn't there anymore. And my discovery there is that I need to keep my client engagement so that I keep my feet on the ground and understand and maintain the why I do it. That's my important thing I've got to do, because I really hope to continue to grow my position and my ability to influence change on a wider scale. But I don't want to lose track of sitting down in front of the very people you're trying to help.
Absolutely. And what does that change on a wider scale look like for you? Sorry, I'm asking hard questions.
No, I do think about these things too, but working in a government organisation, there's always policy shifts that are directed by the people who sit in the big buildings, you know, in Melbourne and Canberra, and it's I think it's quite easy for policies and royal commissions to throw out the baby with the bathwater, you know, to make these big, broad, sweeping changes, and lose a lot of what does work. And I think that ultimately, I guess in the long run, I'd like to be in a position to at least influence on policy. I would like to, because I like to think that I am authentic in my role, and I like to think I've got clients' interests at heart. The day I lose touch with them will be the day I step away, so that I'm not causing trouble. But I like to think right now that I'm sincere enough that I've got something to say at that table, you know, to try and influence policy, because it's not about what we do or how we do it or making it more efficient. It's why we do it. There's got to be why right at the heart of that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just talking, you get to the high level of the people who are releasing the funds, and that's the politicians who are in for a popularity contest or voter count, you know. And I mean, I can understand why they do it, but they're miles away from the reason we're here, trying to make change in our communities, so that my kids can grow up in a nicer town, or so that people around us are just happier in general, you know. That's why we do it.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting you say that in terms of policy change, but there still being a purpose for it, and the purpose, yes, for self, but also for the greater good. And it takes me back to, I've been listening to Becoming Michelle Obama, her book on the audiobook. And it's amazing what she writes about, and how she writes about the purpose and her journey through childhood to living in the White House, and what that was like, but those intricate experiences and it was always purpose around it. That was the theme. Yeah.
And it's too easy to be swept away and, oh, my career or my aspirations or my influence, but it's not my influence. It's my client's influence. It's my community's influence, and I'm just trying to help that. And that's what I need to remember every day, because otherwise you just get carried away with, oh, I can do this if I want to. And is it really what you should be doing, you know?
And that in itself is a privilege, right? Like, you as one person have the capacity to be able to influence change, or have these different capacities in order to make the world a better place, right? Whatever that world is, we think about world as global, but it could be your street, it could be your house, it could be your community. And that's
yeah, and we have a tendency, just in Western society at least, to try and sort of fit people into the right categories, you know, round pegs for round holes, and the system is this, and you have to attain this standard to be able to do this, you know, whatever it is. But one of the things I was taught quite well when I was doing disability outreach was working with people with various levels of impairment or ability. I mean, I worked with people generally who were born with intellectual disability and quite low IQs, or acquired brain injuries, again, resulting in the same sort of impairment to like their intellectual function or their motor skills, you know, the reactions. And a lot of the time, because I was working with people on skills development and growth, a really common thing with young men and women that I would work with would be, I want to get my driver's license. Now, any one of us could look at some of the people that I might have been working with and going, never. You know, it's just, how are you going to pass the test? Like, how's this going to work? You know, now that's what you're saying in your inner monologue. This is not what you'd say to a person, because who am I to say you're not going to manage that? And so the point of that is, let them try. All right, what's the first step we've got to do? All right, let's go to Vic Roads and we'll get an application form. Give them a try. All right, you managed that. There you go. All right, what comes next? You know, book up your hazard awareness. And yeah, that's where I would see it fall down a fair bit. But why am I going to tell them they can't do it? You know, who am I to say, you can't do that, you won't meet the system? That's not my job to do that. Let's give them a chance. Let's let them learn for themselves where the weaknesses or the pitfalls are. How can you maybe overcome them? And I actually did see somebody who I thought never had a chance actually achieve a driver's license. It was a restricted one, but they actually ended up getting there. And I guess the point of that is, we as a society just need to be aware that the people in charge aren't just all seeing all knowledge. Like, we have to be listening to the people, the people we're trying to help, the wider community, and the people who are suffering the disadvantages. They're the ones to be listened to. I can't tell anyone how they're going to fix their life. I can help them walk the road, but I can't fix it for them.
And that idea, giving people a chance, you don't know. You don't know until that chance has been provided as to what the outcome's going to be.
Exactly.
But it's not the truth, or like it's not happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Now, Allan, have I not asked you a question, or something you've wanted to cover, something that I haven't delved into?
I don't know. I feel like I've been rambling a lot, to be honest. So it's hard to say.
Yes.
I don't know. I think if maybe I find myself occasionally speaking to community groups and things about sort of social perceptions of the people I support just now and things. And a lot of people, there was one organization in particular I'd spoken to about sort of youth diversion work, which is something I've got a bit of a passion in as well. I'm quite lucky. I sit on the board of a youth organization, and I've done some youth mentoring just in volunteering as well. And I spoke to a community group sort of middle of last year, and they were quite, I don't know, I seemed to motivate, I don't know, they were interested in what I was saying. And so they got to the end and said, how can we help? Who can we give money to? I went, that's the wrong question. No, like, talk to someone. Like, the next time you see someone who's struggling in the street, or, go to a sports club and find a kid that's always got secondhand kit, or, just ask your grandson who his poor mates are, or something, anything. Just talk to someone and just give them a word of encouragement. That's all you have to do. That small thing is the community influence. And I think it starts, everybody can do it. Everybody can do it. I mean, I've got a couple of clients I support who are homeless, and like when I talk to them, they think, oh, the community just thinks I'm a deadbeat. Nobody looks at me, and they'll be sitting there outside a shop with a, help me post, So, I can understand it. He can see how he gets there. But he says, whenever somebody actually just stops and says, how you going? He said that alone is just, it makes him a person for a little while. And that it doesn't cost anyone anything, or even a great deal of time. You don't have to set aside every weekend to go off and do soup kitchen work or anything if you don't want to, if you don't have time for that. You can just say hello to a person who's being ignored. It's as simple as that. And I think that would be a message I would try and promote to as many people as possible, because you've no idea the effect it will have on a person who feels ostracized and dropped out, Kindness is free,
And what if a person wants to say hi and wants to do that, like actually wants to engage with someone who might not be in a great space, and they're fearful of what might happen? As I said, adults are really interesting beings, and you make or predict these scenarios, and you step back and go, what then? Like, how do people go about just going?
I would say don't. If you're fearful, don't do it, because the person that you're even trying to say hello to is going to pick up on that, and then they'll still just feel like a victim. Don't do it. I'm fortunate enough to actually know most of the homeless people in Shep now. I can say, how you going? Are you tracking all right? You need help, and then so it's all right for me because they know who I am generally. Yes. But yeah, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't. I'm not saying that everyone has to go out there and be a social justice warrior, or because you can patronize people if you get it wrong. I'm just saying, if you're comfortable, if someone does ask you for a buck here and there, you can always say, oh, having a tough day, mate. There you go. Even a comment, you're not saying, oh, well, you're a dropout. You can say, having a hard day, man. And even that alone just humanizes the situation a bit. I mean, everyone has rubbish times, and it doesn't take a lot. I just think that just a little bit more empathy and a little bit more kindness across the board would be a really, really nice change in society. And it doesn't take a lot of effort, but it does take everybody just to do a tiny thing,
And I'm so glad you said that, Allan. Like, it does take everyone, and we're all involved in the community. And if one person or a group of people are not in a great space, it's a ripple effect, whether we realize it or not, or want to acknowledge it or not. It's a ripple effect. And also,
you don't know someone's story, so don't judge just from what you can see. There's a reason they're there, and they probably don't want to be there.
That's exactly right. The choice of actually being in that space is not a natural one.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what does a utopic world look like for you?
Physically, it looks like there's a lot less concrete and a lot more grass and trees, I think. But a utopic society, just everybody's got a part, everybody's got a place, like I often look back fondly on the sort of, I don't even know how real it was, the fairy tale of the small villages where there's a baker, a butcher, a farmer, a builder, a doctor, one person that has a role in the society. And I think that would just be just fine. There'd be no need for money. Everybody just looks after everyone else, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost so idyllic that it can't ever have existed, right? It's just, but I think that's where I'd be at. I think, and just everybody gets a chance to be sort of social and doesn't have to work 40, 50 hours a week. Everyone just does their role and everyone gets something out of it. That would be ideal.
That sounds wonderful. And yeah, you actually did give your key takeaways. Were there any other key takeaways for the audience listening?
Conversations. That's it. Talk to people. Just talk to people. There's too many prejudices, or yeah, everyone's got a preconceived notion on one thing or another. Whether it's my line of work or whether it's a million other things. Listen. Yeah, listen to people. I think that's the key thing. You learn more when you listen. You can do what I do and just talk for ages, but if you listen, you'll learn more. Yeah.
No, Ellen, it's a chapter. It's literally there for you to talk as much as yeah. That is so wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to discuss your chapter. And as usual, we never know where the conversation quite goes once we get into it. But it was so wonderful, yeah, to learn about your discoveries. And I hope it gets people, whoever's watching this, I hope it gets you thinking about your own discoveries, past, present, and future. And yeah, for anyone listening, please do share this chapter with other people that might resonate with it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me as well. It's nice chat to have.
Yeah, no, so wonderful. Thank you. And I'll stop recording.